David, as you look back at your last three addresses to the Christian Businessman's Connection, what is it you were trying to impart in terms of the macro vision?
Well, what we're trying to do here at Cbmc over the last couple of days, based on a lot of the research that we've conducted, is to give a sense of what's actually happening in our culture. So one of my sort of life quotes is that the first job of a leader is to accurately describe reality. And so I think a lot of Christian leaders don't do a very good job of really understanding what's actually happening in our culture today. And so based on a lot of the research, the polling that we've done, we're trying to understand today's culture, particularly the next generation, and how it is that the Christian community can actually help them. I think one of the things that's maybe most interesting is that 54% of today's 18 to 34-year-olds are interested in starting their own business or have started their own business. So it's a very entrepreneurial generation, and they have a lot of baggage when it comes to what it means to be a person of faith and business. And so I'm trying to help, explain, and how is it that we as Christian leaders, Christian business leaders in particular, can actually help this next generation think through their vocation, their calling, in light of what God's asked them to do.
David, in your estimation and all of your research, how important is marketplace ministry?
Well, I think it's going to be a super important part of the way, let me think I want to answer that.
That's good. That's good. Just take your time. Could you start out by saying, I think marketplace ministry?
Sure.
Yeah. Take your time.
Yeah. Well, if you look at just the stats, let me go this way. I think that marketplace ministry is going to be very important. If you just look at the pure stats, more than 99% of Christians in America are not in professional ministry. And so we've got to make a good argument for connecting our faith Monday through Friday. And I think that this is an area that over the next decade or so, this is going to be an area of real growth. This idea of vocation and discipleship is going to be an important part of the way the Christian community understands its current calling, really, to today's culture.
The Barna Group for years has done such a splendid job of being able to gauge and to sort of direct what's going on through a lot of really good in-depth research. What are you finding right now that might even cause you some surprise?
Well, there's a lot of skepticism. Let me put it this way. One of the things that's really surprising to me as we do a lot of the research is that there's a lot of skepticism towards Christianity. And I guess that shouldn't be a huge surprise. But one of the ways that we're starting to see this is there's a lot of perceptions of Christians, and we've really done, I think, a disservice really to what it means to follow Christ in our culture today. And as this sort of rising sense of skepticism increases, one of the interesting sides of that is I think there's going to be an increasing indifference towards Christianity. And that's going to be, I think, even a more challenging reality for us, is that people just won't even care what we think. And so I think we've got to pay really good attention to what it is that people think about us, and not just so we can, present a better face to them, but because being a Christian actually matters to the way we live our lives, the way we live our families, the way we run our businesses. And, it's fine if they, have the wrong perceptions of us on certain things. But the worst thing would be for us to, if our churches went away and no one even recognized that we were gone.
Do you believe that America could be or is on the path of becoming a post-Christian society?
I think this idea of being a post-Christian nation can be a little threatening to Christians, but we are certainly in a multi-faith culture, and we have to recognize that. And I think we've done a poor job, really, of living with differences. And so we have to, being post-Christian doesn't mean that we're, non-Christian. It just means, if you think about us being a post-literate culture, it doesn't mean that reading has gone away. It's just buried. It's just one more fact. We're a very oral culture. We're a very visual culture. And so we're still a very Christian culture, but we're not primarily a Christian culture. And I think we have to recognize that. And so rather than thinking of ourselves as sort of the dominant majority, how it is that we as Christians can serve this community, build better churches, build better schools, build better families, build better businesses. That is really the hope of being in a post-Christian culture. And one of the things that we've been concluding from a lot of the research is that if you look at the complexity of culture today, that if you look at the Old Testament, the Hebrew scriptures, there's a sense in which being in Babylon, Daniel, Esther, Jeremiah, those were certainly post-faith cultures. They were very spiritual, but not necessarily God-fearing. And so I think we have to be really cautious in the way we talk about these terms. So we are in a post-Christian era in the United States, But it's more like we're living in this complex culture that's like Babylon. And how is it that Christians can thrive within that? We can serve the city, we can build homes and plan to stay, as Jeremiah 29 says. And so there's a way in which we can go forward in this post-Christian complex culture that is absolutely faithful to what Scripture asks us to do.
You spent a lot of time here in Squaw Valley talking about living in exile. Even Christians, evangelical Christians, we find ourselves living in this state of exile. What were you trying to say to the group here?
If you think about Daniel, and the most famous story from his life is the lion's den, and every Christian knows about that. But what we fail to recognize is just how Babylonian Daniel and the other peers of his in Babylon would have been. And being in exile is a very different kind of experience than being in a majority. And as you're in a majority, you can kind of dictate the terms of a lot of things. And I think what God is asking us to do, perhaps, is to think differently about how it is that we serve culture. That it's not about our rights and our expectations of people around us, but instead that we become known for the things that we do and not the things that we're against. And this is a lot of the research that we've been doing. The books that I've been writing have tried to help wake up the American church to some of these realities that we're often perceived for all the things we're against rather than the things that we're for. And being in a culture of complexity and accelerated life and technology, this isn't just about some sort of vague esoteric theological perspective. This is about our own children. This is about our own families. This is about our own communities, our own businesses. How well it is that we can actually serve God through these things in a world that's in many ways off the rails. And that means that we don't have to be fearful of that world. We can actually engage it because God calls us to do that.
You said something in your first session that I thought was rather intoxicating. You said, this next generation, we need them more than they need us. And that was a subject of a lot of after-session discussion. Can you unpack that for me a little bit?
Sure. Well, I mean, just on the surface.
Would you start by saying,
sure.
First session I said.
Yeah, okay. Sure. Well, one of the things we said in our sessions here was the idea that we need this next generation more than they need us. And more particularly, we said that the Christian community needs exiles in a culture of complexity. So what was fascinating about Esther and Daniel and Jeremiah is that you actually have to have their faithfulness in order for the community of faith, for the Hebrew community to make it forward in Babylon. And so we need exiles. We need young people to shake us up. And I mean, I think on the surface of it, it's sort of just an obvious thing. You need the next generation. You're not going to have a church. You're not going to have a community of faith if they're not going to buy into it. And a lot of our research is showing that millions of young Christians are giving up on the church. And so we have to look in the mirror and do some soul searching and say, why is it that that's the case? And we can wrap ourselves in bubble wrap and say, this isn't really happening in my family or my church or my community. And you may have some exceptions to the rule, but if we're losing a majority of young people, we have to do, I think, a better job of understanding what it is that's causing them to leave, and why is it that they're giving up on the gospel at such an early age.
I remember 4 years ago picking up a USA Today, and it said the problem with church in America is there are too few men in the pews anymore. Can you address that? What has your research shown over the last several years about men? Because your research is irrefutable. If you can get a man to church, the chance of getting his whole family to go to church is pretty good.
That's actually not our research.
It's not yours?
No, but
okay.
I think there's
that whole
sure.
issue.
Sure. Let's do it this way. A lot of our research shows that women are much more spiritually engaged than men in church. This is across various religious groups as well, not just Christian men. And certainly we could say that there's millions of men who are missing. Actually, one of the interesting things that we're finding in our research is that women are actually disengaging from the church over the last decade or so. It's almost as though their heroic effort to sort of support these congregations and do the volunteer work and a lot of the sort of the giving and all the rest is falling on hard times. We've actually produced a book through Barna Group called The Resignation of Eve, what if Adam's rib was no longer willing to be the church's backbone? And so it's an interesting thing. I mean, I think this issue of gender is going to be a really important one for us to deal with. Obviously, the next generation sees a partnership, with generations and with genders in ways that we have to be very cognizant of. I think we have to be really thoughtful about the ways that we would work with men and also with women. I think there's some important issues that we need to address. That if women are giving up on the church as much as men have done, that's going to be another challenge for us as a Christian community.
One final question, David. Give us something positive to go out on. What do we take away here from Lake Tahoe? What do we go home and say, this is the nugget? What would the nugget be?
Well, there's so many of them. There's so many different positive things that we can take, I think, from an experience like this. First of all, it's wonderful for us to get together as believers and to think and pray and to consider what it is that this next generation is telling us. We have a lot of wisdom that we've accumulated through life experiences and through the years and through the decades and building our businesses. But now the real question is, what do we do now? And the hope part of it for me is the next generation. I mean, I brought my daughter Annika on this trip, and you see the beauty of the way she's pursuing Jesus. You see the beauty of the way that her calling could be expressed in this world, and this idea of vocation and really marketplace work. Vocation is more than just faith and work. It's also all the vocations of our lives, our parenting, our work in community, our volunteering, our role as a citizen, our role as a global citizen. And so, I'm very hopeful about the way the church can respond to this. It's important that we do have an accurate understanding. If we're in exile, if we're in a minority position rather than being in power, we have to serve rather than push people towards a certain agenda. And we can do that through great businesses. We can do that through great churches. We can do that through healthy families. And so we've got a lot of work to do, but the Christian community can rise to the occasion because God ultimately is in control. So we can have great confidence in that as well.
We thank you for coming. We thank you for sharing. We thank you for your heart for Christ.
Absolutely, man. It's my pleasure.
Chad, you're here with your beautiful wife, Karen. What has this PC meant to you and your wife?
It's been a tremendous weekend, just being able to connect with other Christian businessmen and hearing how God is working in their lives to impact their businesses and really their communities for Christ. And so I think we're both coming away from here encouraged and re-energized to continue to bring Christ to the marketplace, even in our town there in Iowa.
And Chad, what one takeaway, what one nugget did you hear that you said, aha, this was worth coming to? Was there one thought, one thing that David might have shared that caused you to say, wow?
Yeah, I think the one thing that Karen and I talked about quite a bit is when David shared that our generation today is being discipled more by the culture than by the word, and whether that's for our kids or whether that's for our staff or whether that's for the people that we interact with on a daily basis, we want that not to be the case in our sphere of influence.
What has Cbmc meant to you personally?
Oh wow, Cbmc has been a faithful bedrock of input into the business specifically through the forums, and it's been enough to us that we started in a forum back in 2006 when we lived in Lincoln, Nebraska. We chose to move to be closer to family back to Atlantic, Iowa, which is 2 hours away from Lincoln, and but I still drive 2 hours every month to be a part of that forum group, and just having that connection with those men and that regular input. And now, since our business has grown, it's being able to have an input into other men that have joined the forum and seeing them grow in their relationship with Christ and their ability to use the business to impact Christ in the world.
Mike, when you look back over the last couple of days, what has this President's Council meant to you and your wife?
Well, for my wife and I, the President's Council has really been a lot about learning about the future of Cbmc. It's been pretty pleasing to see how much effort and how much is going into learning how to connect with the next generation. So even, I feel like I'm kind of in that target audience of, 30 years old and younger, and just to see the humility of all the guys, at the table and having the discussions after listening to the speaker, and everyone wants to know, like, setting their pride aside, like, how can we humble ourselves and learn new ways of thinking about things, and how can we connect with those people in a deep way that's meaningful to them?
If you had to take one thing away, and when you and Kristen have gone back to your room and you've sat and discussed, what might be one or two of the takeaways that you'll leave here with?
Well, I think probably one of the biggest takeaways that I would leave the council with, of both me and Kristen, and just in having all of these conversations again after kind of listening to the keynote over the last few days, is that ultimately, everyone just wants to know that they're loved. And it's not even necessarily about memorizing the statistics about younger people as much as it is setting aside our agendas and just caring about people individually, and that kind of heartfelt need that people have to be loved and cared for on an individual basis. That just that's common in all generations, but it's certainly something that us younger people really value.
We had lunch the other day here at the resort, and you were sharing with me that that you and your wife had an epiphany that David touched on it the other day, and it's not giving from what we have left over. It's making a decision to give what Christ commands us to give, irrespective of what we might be bringing in. Can you share a little bit about how you and your wife made the decision to step up and to begin a tithing process?
Sure. Yeah. Kind of early in the year, we definitely had a slower time with our company. So slow that we definitely even questioned whether or not that God was asking us to keep going. We had a friend that very prayerfully was trying to help us kind of decipher what was going on, and he kind of felt like there was some spiritual things that were even kind of holding our company from going forward, and really challenged us in the giving perspective. So yeah, I made that hard decision to say, okay, God, I'm going to put this all in your hands and give what's left in our business checking account. And I did that, and then I decided, I kind of felt God putting it on my heart to start giving, a fairly small percentage, but right off the top of our sales, and not even wait, until we see what's left over. We just give to God first and trust that He'll bring it in. And yeah, honestly, it's been hard to manage the tidal wave of projects that have come in over the rest of the year. So yeah, it was pretty cool, and I really feel like God blessed us for just taking the step to trust Him.
Perfect. Scott, as you look back over the last 3 days here in Lake Tahoe, what a beautiful setting, but perhaps even more importantly, tremendous messages delivered. What will be your takeaway from this particular President's Council?
Well, for me, with an 18-year-old,
Okay.
with an 18-year-old son and a 23-year-old daughter, it was just really spot on. Yeah, it's hard to talk when I'm seeing them. And because we've been trying to understand their faith and why it doesn't necessarily match what we kind of our experience and how they look at church and God, and so David really helped me, and I think my wife as well, see that and understand and to kind of see how to put that in place. Really appreciate the book. You Lost Me. I'm looking forward to reading that and kind of seeing what other clues on how to kind of coach my kids as they grow in their faith. So I think it was just really spot on. I really appreciated it.
Scott, as you look back, is there one takeaway that you and your wife have discussed during your private moments here at the resort? Is there one nugget that's going to stick with you that maybe David shared or perhaps another member of Cbmc shared with you?
Wow. Yeah, probably just being careful about how we live out our faith and walk out our faith, and there's a lot of talk about how to respond to the homosexual issue, and realizing that the generations look at this issue differently, but we all need to look at it biblically, and all that we do needs to be with love, because that's sort of the validity, and so that's the takeaway for me is just to be reflecting on that, and to make sure that my zeal and my heart and my passion are always grounded in the love of Christ.
The other day when you spoke to some of the board members and some of us who were in the room,
Yes.
I recall you got a little emotional when you were talking about Cbmc and what this ministry has meant to you. And can you put into words for us, Scott, what the Christian Businessmen's Connection has done for you and your wife?
Wow. That's a big question. I think back when her dad invited me. Boy, you really want to touch my soft spot. When he.
Could you start by saying, I think back to when my wife's dad invited me.
Yeah, sure.
Whenever you're ready.
Sure. I think when my wife's dad invited me out when I was 29 years old to this breakfast meeting with a bunch of guys at 6:30 in the morning on a Friday, and I said he was pleasantly persistent because he kind of asked me a bunch of times, but I didn't realize. So I finally set my alarm clock. I came out and I met a bunch of guys that were mostly older than me, but that had a real wisdom and had a real zeal for living out their faith in the marketplace. And they were focused, and me kind of being young in my career in the corporate world, these guys really helped anchor me and helped give me a vision and a focus, and gave me opportunities to learn and to grow and to teach. And then when God called me to step out of that corporate world about 7 years ago and to follow Him in full-time ministry, and then a position opened up in Cbmc, it's just been amazing to see how that seeing my marketplace as my mission field has just given me it's been empowering, it's been encouraging, and the tools, and so now I'm kind of at that role that those other guys were when I first joined the ministry, and it's just exciting to communicate that vision, that our lives are so much bigger, and our lives, the position of them in the marketplace where God has us called, and the fact that right where we are is our mission field, and we don't have to go someplace else, but just to see that and to treat it, and the whole idea of to be an ambassador and not a tourist has just been resonating with me, and and just the fruit of being an ambassador has been pretty exciting. So that's kind of a big answer, but
good answer. A good answer.
Okay.
Thank you. What meant to you?
Well, Phil, this is our second President's Council, and we have seen the unity and the relationship of brothers in Christ, saying that we have a mission in the marketplace, and it charges us up to be together and then go out and do that mission. It is about relationships, and I had a very good friend of mine come and join us at the President's Council this year. He absolutely loved it, captured the vision, and he said, when can we get started? So we're absolutely thrilled to be part of encouraging another man, another family, to be part of the mission, marketplace ministry of Cbmc.
Dave, if you had one takeaway, one thought that you and Cheryl have talked about in your private time, what would your takeaway be? What's going to be the big message that you're going to take back to Pennsylvania?
Well, the phrase that really stuck with us is disciples in exile.
Start it again, and hold on a second.
The most important thing that struck us was the phrase disciples in exile. And as we go back to our cities, we have a message that, yes, we're in a foreign land, but we've got a message of hope for the people that we go back to.
Cheryl, as you and Dave have talked the 3 days you've been here about what you've been taught, what you've learned, what you've seen, what you've internalized, what would be the big thing you're going to take back home with you? Okay.
I guess aside from what David already mentioned, I don't know, the term being disciples in exile or God's people in exile. The other thing is that struck me the importance of being relevant to the next generation, the ways that we can be creative in being up on the things of this world without being a part of it, and using technology to its full advantage for Christ, seeing the way that we can connect to the younger generation and yet help them understand that it's about relationship. It's not all about technology or how much we know, but it's really people meeting people, because God loves us as a people, and He's given us gifts, He's given us technology to be used for His glory.
The Christian Businessmen's Connection is generally regarded as a men's ministry, but do you have a different take on that?
I really believe it's a family ministry, because as God is working in the hearts of men in the business or the marketplace, that affects the whole family. So men that are understanding the relationship that God wants to have with them have a different view then on their relationship at home, how to look for a wife, how to treat a wife, how to raise their children. And I think it affects, the ripple effect is just endless.
Oh, that's what I wanted.
Okay.
Leanne, so oftentimes people view the Christian Businessmen's Connection as strictly a men's ministry. I have a little bit of a different take on that.
I do. This has been more than 30 years. It's been a part of our family. And our family has gone to family camps. The first year, Doug said, just go, and if you never want to go again, we don't have to. But trust me, people like it. We went, and our girls were hooked. They made some lifelong friends that way, and I have too. It's been a wonderful place for all of us to just plug into other believers and to be challenged and stimulated. It is a family ministry.
What has this President's Council meant to you personally as you think back over the last few days?
It's been a lot. It's been really, really fun. Doug has been involved in Cbmc for more than 30 years, but he's been on the board for 8. And at first I kind of resented the fact that he would be gone and I couldn't be, I was working. But now I have learned to love the people that are on the board, and I've gotten to know people from all over the country. It's been a wonderful experience, and it's fun to reunite every year, at least once a year, and see what's happening in people's lives.
As you head home, what would be your one takeaway from this conference? Has anything really resonated in you that you've said, oh my gosh?
Yes, it has. We need to change our ministry direction a little. We've got young children, they're 30 and 32.
Oh, hold on a second.
Okay.
I heard a loud buzz.
Oh, okay.
Okay, it's okay now. Would you start by saying this President's Council has, and then go ahead and...
This President's Council has changed my direction, I think, a little bit. I'm realizing that we do need to approach people through the internet and through some different means that we have not done before. But I see the importance of that in our girls and their husbands' lives. That's the way to reach them. And that's what I've taken away from this particular President's Council.
Alvin, Sandy, as this President's Council winds up, what has it meant to you?
Well, it's been a corroboration for my ministry for the past 15 years, focusing on Operation Timothy, and the realization that Cbmc is going in the right direction.
And I just really have appreciated renewing a few older acquaintances, meeting a lot of new people. It's exciting to see a lot of younger generation getting involved in Cbmc.
If you had one takeaway, one thing you'll talk about on your way back to Indiana, what would the one thing be, the big aha moment for both of you?
I really appreciated David Kinnaman and what he had to say about being exiles in our Babylon and trying to reach the younger generation where they are.
Jeremiah 29:7, peace and well-being in the city, and the realization that we're exiles, we're ambassadors to the city.
Ellen, you've been a part of this ministry a long time, and you've got a lot of people that are working the harvest field with you in the Indianapolis and the Indiana area in general. And you've seen a lot of changing of the guards. Are we on the right track here as we go into the 21st century?
Oh, absolutely. We have David Kinnaman's partner 15 years ago. George Barna wrote the book Second Coming of the Church, and he said that Christians aren't acting like Christians, and the solution to that is one-on-one discipleship. Yesterday, David concluded with the same thing, and the realization that, yeah, we're on the right track with one-on-one discipleship. It just needs to grow.
We got it. Here we go.
Okay.
It's been a great last 3 days here in Lake Tahoe. Nan, Victor, what has this President's Council meant to you?
It's been great. It's been a time of renewing friendships and learning more about Christian businessmen and the excitement of the ministry and seeing how they're going forward with the young people. We're excited about that, and with our children being of that age group and category too. So it's very big excitement, I guess you'd say, in the ministry.
This gives me a lot of hope for the future of our country and our world, because I see business and professional men and their wives who love the Lord and want to reach the marketplace and share the love of Jesus Christ. It just gives me a lot of excitement to go forward from here.
We had three pretty provocative messages from Dave Kinnaman. Some of them made us feel a little uncomfortable.
Yes.
What would your takeaways be? What was the aha moment for each of you? Richard, you first. Victor, you first.
Well, he was great in sharing some
Did you start by saying David Kinnaman was great? Ready? And
yeah, David Kinnaman was really great in sharing some information with us that I don't think everyone's aware of completely, about how this next generation sees the church and sees faith in the marketplace and in their lives, and is it relevant? And I think he really challenged us to recognize that we've got to change our approach in terms of reaching that generation.
I would say that David just gave me so much food for thought in the how to reach young people, and that is an area that I think it's so needed in. So the information was invaluable that he gave. I enjoyed each one of his speeches, looked forward to them more and more too.
you know, our ministry is generally regarded as a men's ministry, Nan, but we heard a compelling testimony on the second day from Ginger Whitaker about it's so much more than a ministry for men. What's your take on that?
Well, I think it encompasses or affects the entire family, and when you start with the husband as the head of the household and what he learns and how his life grows and increases in this fellowship and ministry, you see how important it is and how many wives and lives and families it can affect.
I agree completely, and us guys, we need the support of our wives and our families so much as we go out to face an often challenging and complex world, and we need some love and support, and it's great to see the kind of care and love that's given in this ministry.
Well, Victor, Dan, thank you so much for your thoughts.
Thank you.
Well, everybody has been saying the same thing. It's been a marvelous 3 days here in Lake Tahoe. What has this President's Council meant to both of you?
Well, you know, for me, as a newcomer to Cbmc, it's really greatly expanded my vision for what Cbmc is all about, especially as it relates to the exciting task we had before us to try to get something going in Boston. So I think that when I came here, I realized my dreams were way too small, and so I think this is really just ignited my heart in ways that I just could never imagine.
Hold on a minute. I'm just going to go in and focus on you. Hold on just a second. You can pick right up on what Kent said if you want. Hold on just a second. And how about for you?
Well, it's our first time here, and for me it was just meeting the people and building the relationships, and nothing can do that one-on-one time is so important, and to see someone and personally talk to them just builds on that experience.
You heard a lot of messages about this ministry being more than just a men's ministry. How about for you personally? What has Cbmc meant to you, even knowing you haven't been involved all that long yet? What have you experienced?
Well, what I've experienced is that the women are just as important as the men, and our role here is, is not only just being a support for our husbands, but support for one another, and we can help this ministry in tremendous ways, and it was a joy to see that.
And Ken, what do you have to say about the role of your wife, the role of women in our ministry?
Well, I guess I saw as living examples of another woman who have obviously invested themselves in much more deeper ways than I ever imagined myself that my wife would have an opportunity to do so.
Got it, guys. Thank you so much. Shelley, I know this is your first President's Council, your first exposure to a large group of CBMCers, but what will be your takeaway when you head home to San Diego? What did you experience that you really enjoyed?
Well, the biggest plus for me was the people. Just awesome group of people. And their love for God and their love for this ministry was very evident, and I really enjoyed meeting every one of them.
If you have one takeaway that perhaps Dave Kinnaman shared or something that you heard around the fire or at dinner, what would be one takeaway that you'll probably munch on for the next few days or few weeks?
I actually got a lot out of what David had to say. I think that his research and learning about the younger generations and what their take on religion and the church and the ministries was eye-opening for me, and that I think I'm going to really strive to try to connect more with the younger people that I know and see if I can't have an impact on their lives and their love for God, because I know that it's in there. Everybody has that desire to have that void filled. So it's not that they don't have the desire. They just don't know how to fill that void. Okay.
Johnny, I know this is your first President's Council, but over the last 3 days, what did you personally experience that you've enjoyed? Okay, it's okay. Think about it a minute.
What I've enjoyed. Why did he give me that question is what I want to know.
I'll give you the other one first.
Give me another one.
All right, here we go. We heard Dave Kinnaman 3 times from the Barna Group. Did anything resonate with you personally? Things that you may take with you and use as you go forward?
David Kinnaman has a tremendous message, a message of Christians being in exile and meeting the.
It's okay.
Sorry.
Start again. That's okay. Think through it. Start over.
Well,
David Kinnaman.
What I want to say about David Kinnaman. David Kinnaman has a strong message and delivered a strong message around meeting people where they are. One of the things that I've particularly enjoyed and been impressed with this weekend is Cbmc's continued hunger and mission to be relevant to men and to their families where they are. That's a critical need. And Cbmc is showing their desire and their hunger to be there.
John, when you think back to the last 3 days and you and Shelley head home, will there be a takeaway, an aha moment that maybe you've had already about what you experienced here, either with the men themselves or part of the message that you might have heard?
What we saw here are men and couples that have a genuine heart for evangelism, for the saving of men's souls, of leading men in the workplace to Christ. And that's an amazing mission and one that's being realized through Cbmc.
I know your mentor, the spiritual giant Phil Stone, has